what are the patterns that you're seeing in humanity right now? Where do you think we're going with all this, like with all the division?
Well, I think it's continuing the tradition of team-based politics. And I think the Stoics would categorize it quite easily as being contingently social, as being something that isn't necessarily invested in virtue. It's just a symptom, really, of a certain social arrangement. And that will perpetuate and will take different names, it will take different forms, but it's not necessarily indicative of universal reason or individual reason for that matter. Which is why I think when we look at ration or reason, your own reason as something that is a trace of something that is beyond you, rather than something that you can kind of allocate to a socially convened team, you get this great sense that no human or alien is a stranger. And this is one of the great practical benefits for people new to Stoicism of viewing it through this really communal kind of lens. Think about, for instance, if you encounter someone who is irrational, they're behaving completely out of what you would consider to be normal. Perhaps they could be a political opponent in this context. They could be running down the street doing whatever. Now, in one regard, you can be completely indifferent to their behavior. You can treat that as an external and employ Stoic reason and categorize it accordingly. But treating externals indifferently is that's one thing, but another thing is to not treat the person themselves as an external. And new practitioners who could look at Stoicism through this communal kind of priority of the Stoics could get this great sense of, okay, their behavior is external, but the person is not. And there you get Hierocles' sense of reach out to people you don't know. Now, he means that figuratively as well as literally. And I think it counters some of the estrangement, particularly in current politics, where people will refuse to acknowledge the other. There is pure otherness in current political discussion. And I think the Stoic sense of sociality is somewhat of an antidote to that.
Antidote, that's the perfect word. It is. And because when you understand, this is actually why I think that it's so important to look at what you're looking at, like the movements of people and the patterns and everything. When you understand that every single person has what you have, the universal reason, right? Every single person is just an offshoot of you. Like Aristotle said, your friend is you, right? Like if you act in your best interests and they act in their best interests, it's like one soul. And when you see other people like that, then you see yourself in other people, right? And you see that you're not a separate person. You are me. Like I can see that I could be angry like you. I can see that I could be deceitful like you. Like Marcus Aurelius said, you wake up in the morning, you think of all these people, but they're like me and they're for me to work with them and them with me. But we've lost that. We've really lost that today. There seems to be this growing movement of people who will not have a discussion if the person on the other end of that discussion thinks slightly left of what they're saying or slightly right of what they're saying. And
I just want to clarify something.
Yeah, jump in.
Because it's not that they have reason; they have capacity for reason. And I want to clarify one other thing from a Stoic position. It's not that humanity from a Stoic position is not negative or aggressive to one another. In fact, Epictetus says if you've lost a sense of shame and modesty, you've cut yourself off. You're effectively no longer acting as a human being. You're acting either as a sheep, which means randomly, or like a beast because you're trying to devour others. So they would say if in your human role, you're actually pro-social. So anybody who is not acting pro-socially is either acting as a sheep, as in those that follow and have no idea what they're doing. They're just acting what we would call randomly because such and such a person on the left or such and such a person on the right said something and therefore they have to agree with them because that's the shepherd they're following, or they're the beast, they're literally devouring reason. So the Stoics would say that if you're taking yourself out of that, it's not that humanity is inherently bad or inherently in conflict. And even Darwin would say that our collaboration gives us success as a species, not our individual desire to stake out a claim or what Will calls a turf war, right? It's the idea that we are inherently social. And then when we cut ourselves, and I would say in the US, there is no sense of modesty and there is no sense of shame on both sides in certain people, some worse than others, when you cut yourself off from humanity, that's when you see this ugly spot rear its head, right? You just see everything that comes out. But I wouldn't say that it is humanity. I would say is the minute you've decided to pursue indifference, and they are more important to you, so status becomes more important to you, wealth becomes more important to you, being right, not reasonable, but being right becomes more important to you. You then cut yourself off, and that's when you see the ugliness. They'll say, "Oh, it's natural for humans to be negative. It's natural," because they're basically saying, "I'm just following the natural lead, and it's normal." They're normalizing their behavior. And actually, if we took a Stoic perspective, actually, if you're going to be a moron, that's not natural. Actually, what you're doing is you're negating your humanity. They would stop. I would think that some people would stop doing it because they no longer can justify this poor behavior, because it doesn't make sense from a Stoic perspective that we are naturally unclean or dirty, or this is very sort of Platonic Christian viewpoint of like, oh, original sin. Like there's no original sin in Stoicism. So we're not originally, it's not where we were with God and therefore we fell from a garden or something and then we became negative and then God had to save us. That's the kind of connotation that you have even in the US, that we're prone to do this. We have no choice, but we can just ask for forgiveness. But Stoics would say, no, you are supposed to be pro-social. You're called to be pro-social. And if you decide to cut yourself off, you're no longer human. You're not playing that role. So I just wanted to distinguish that it's not that there's no dystopia in that sense. Like we're not condemned to this
I understand
chaos.
what you're saying. I know, and I have been corrected on that now because I see that that's how the Stoics see it. I guess it's maybe, I think that even that perspective, it is so easy for that to become perverted. So for example, let's take abortion, for example. We're not going to get into a discussion, but on both sides, you could have that person saying, hey, the other side is not taking care of their social responsibilities, or they're not being a part of the... So for example, on the right, you could have people saying, well, you're killing babies and therefore you're separating yourself from the society. Yeah. And on the other side, they're saying, well, you're killing women who might have problems with their birth and they can't get an abortion. So you don't care about women and therefore you're away from society, right? And that still leads you to otherizing people because you see them not as human, but you see them, as you may have said, like, and I'm not saying that you're calling people animals, but you see them as separated from yourself. But if the goal is to be a human, and to be a human is to be perfectly aligned with our social nature, then a human doesn't exist, because there's not a human who hasn't at one point in their life or still doesn't hold some sort of prejudice or some sort of stereotype, or it just doesn't exist, right? Like, I don't know, you can both probably jump in here, but I don't know, are we going to rely on the sage being the only person who's like a true human in that case?
No, I think there are those moments which we've all recognized in Stoicism where they will say that if you act irrationally, you make yourself an abscess on the universe, for instance, is one term. So it's not that the ideological figure of the sage could be the only social constituent. Rather, the point is that and this is a nice intersection with sociology, is that we're all inherently social. We're inescapably social. We're inescapably communal. That's our default mode. Now, for the Stoics, the way that we rationally accord ourselves with the universe will determine whether we maintain that, whether we slip in and out of it, et cetera, et cetera. But for the difference between that and social theory is that normative and non-normative behavior, and by that they mean if you completely step outside social trends, then you're still socially conditioned. You're still socially produced. You're still part of it. It's all a very complicated fabric. The Stoic sense of being social would not only comprise the sage in that sense. It would rather always involve everyone, to the extent that your decision-making process is a collective citizenship. It's something that you've derived from what Marcus Aurelius calls the universal singular community. And you can't help but have that. Sure, you can act irrationally, And at those points, there'll be a tension between you and the universe, so to speak. But that doesn't discount the fact that you are born for community, as he literally says, or as Seneca says, born for universal fellowship.
Yeah. Yeah.